Welcome to a real cult classic where we talk about, well, your favorite cult classics, a little bit of pop culture, a smattering of old Hollywood gossip, the side of scandal and intrigue. I'm your esteemed cult leader, Megs from the Cult of Megs, and this is my friend, your friend, cult elder, Auntie Amy. Amy, say hi to the cult.
Hey, friends.
As you all know, it is October, and every week we're covering something spooky. So, viewer beware.
You're in for a scare.
So, Amy, this week, our scares are going to be ghosts and cryptids.
Cryptids. How do you say it?
Cryptid?
Cryptids.
A cryptid.
Cryptids?
Cryptid.
Cryptids.
A cryptid.
I
We were
know.
gonna go local, but Amy had a
No,
hard time with Ontario. So maybe if any of you
I
are from the
did.
region, you can let us know your favorite cryptids from the Ontario. That's it.
I like the
From the
Ontario.
Ontario.
Don't you ever just want to say cryptic when this is
I
why
mean,
my
they are
brain just
cryptic.
keeps changing it to cryptic and then I can't say
They're
it for some
cryptic
reason.
cryptids.
Cryptic cryptids.
That'd be a
That's a
good
tongue
band
twister.
name. Cryptic Cryptids. So we
You
also have
need a
some
short form.
personal ghost stories that we're gonna share too. So we got a jam
Yeah,
packed full of scares, I hope, if we can keep
that's
it
right.
together.
That's right. And how are you doing this week?
I'm okay.
That sounded like such an endorsement for
The weather is
yourself.
killing me. It's killing my spirit and my soul, but I'm here.
It's your migraines are coming back.
Yeah, I've had like some
Mm,
pretty bad sinus headache migraines.
oh,
Well,
yes,
I
that's
came and
true.
visited you the other day.
You did. Well,
We went for a
technically, you were
walk.
visiting my dog, your
I
birthday
was.
twin. So, one of
Um,
my dogs.
and I did. I had a decent migraine, but we persevere. Life is pain.
Can you please tell the Cultlings what you said to my dog twice on the when she
Oh
jumped on
yes.
you?
If anybody saw my What's in the Bag video, you know that I swapped out my durable bagoo for my lovely buttery leathered Peranza Spoiler bag, which I had on me when I decided to go for a hike in nature, because that's who I am at my core. And Amy's youngest pup, she likes to jump up on us. She likes to dance with us like a people. And I yelled, Stevie, not the Peranza. And Amy lost her mind.
I think I lost my mind, and your wonderful husband also poked fun. It
Yeah,
was pretty
because,
funny.
yeah.
I mean, if you saw what I was wearing versus what uh, consistently cool leader Megs was wearing, you would laugh. I was just like in dirty shoes and already scuffed up shirts, like a shirt and pants, because my dogs are always jumping on me. And Megan just was so pristine. And you saw her makeup from that tutorial. That's what
Mm-hmm.
she was wearing on her eyes.
And it
She looked,
stuck. I mean, in all fairness, our dear elder Auntie Amy did purchase a leather couch when she moved for her two dogs to sleep on. So
yeah, that was poor planning on my part,
a beautiful buttery leather couch
which is
with a
now
white
defiled.
buccal ottoman that we kept yelling, "Don't put your butt on the buccal" to Stevie.
Well, more for etiquette. Like, she's not allowed to jump up on there. And she was just
Mm-hmm.
using any means necessary to get closer to your faces. And you know how I feel about that. I want you to have a break from her love. She's so
She's very effusive with her love, but we
relentless.
love her.
Yeah, we do. We love her.
She's a relentless breed. It's not her fault.
That's true. It's true.
Amy, are you ready to tell us your spooky tales for this week?
Yes. Um,
I'm ready.
I'm okay. So I love how you said that as you took a sip of was it a Coke?
It's a cherry Coke because
I
I
was
need
gonna
the
say,
caffeine for my headache.
such a dramatic sip. You have a straw like a dainty lady.
Because the dental hygienists, every time I get a new hygienist, they're like, your enamel is garbage. And I'm like, well, it always has been, but okay. I use straws. Leave me alone.
Oh, straw. I thought straws were bad for that.
No, the straws are good for enamel. They're bad for the
Oh yeah, the wrinkles in
puckering.
your
Yeah.
mouth, but that's okay. You can't. What are you gonna do?
That's why you apply eye
You
cream there.
Do you actually?
Yeah. Put your eye cream on your lip.
Ah, a tip, a makeup tip for everyone.
Little
Put
dab
eye
there and then boop,
cream
boop, 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 boop.
on the top of your lip.
Yep.
Okay, cryptids. Truthfully, I started research on skinwalkers in the Appalachian communities when I stumbled on the Mothman. So I dovetailed a bit and changed course. Now, I couldn't believe I had never heard of the Mothman before, so that made me more determined to read about it. Have you heard of the Mothman, Megan?
I have. I watched the Mothman prophecies, I believe. And I'm a big oh, what was it called? There was like a show on Discovery with that Josh Gates guy. I think he covered the Mothman too.
I had never heard of the Mothman, which was very weird to me. So I just changed course and I decided, you know what? This is where we're going. So one of the most commonly researched cryptids are UFOs and Bigfoot. Now, then you have winged humanoids, witnessed throughout history, and the Mothman would be classified as such. Unlike Bigfoot, the Mothman has a distinct beginning. We know when the first sighting was, which was November 16th, 1966, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, two couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, were driving down a dark road outside of town when they spotted a large winged creature. It stood 6 to 7 feet tall. It was gray and had big red eyes. The creature flew over their car and followed them back to town until they reached the National Guard Armory on Route 62. Now, the couples went straight to the sheriff, reported it, and the local paper, the Point Pleasant Register, picked up the story. Now, in the article, Steve Millette and Roger were interviewed, and Millette said it was like a man with wings. It wasn't like anything you'd see on TV or in a monster movie. They also said that the creature was extremely fast, flying about 100 miles an hour, but that it was a clumsy runner. They thought the creature might be living in a vacant power plant outside of town, possibly in one of the huge boilers, because there were pigeons in all the other buildings except that particular plant. So I guess the meaning behind that is that the Mothman would either frighten away the pigeons or perhaps feast on them. So once the article came out, panic in the town ensued and the legend began. Now, dozens of encounters with the Mothman would be reported over the next year, which included sightings while people were driving or reports of the Mothman in people's front yards. Now, the Gettysburg Times reported 8 additional sightings in the 3 days after the first claims, including two volunteer firefighters who used similar language to Millette and Scarberry to describe what they saw. But one of the more famous accounts came from Newell Partridge, a contractor who was quoted as saying that he feels the Mothman might have had something to do with the disappearance of his $350 German Shepherd dog, Bandit. Now, Partridge said that he saw a thing in a meadow near his home in Doddridge County about 90 minutes before the couple's original sighting. For context, Partridge lived 100 miles north of Point Pleasant. Now, apparently, Partridge's TV started acting like a generator, carrying on something terrible. So he shined a flashlight into the field, saw something with eyes like red reflectors. His dog's hair stood straight up, and the dog ran into the field and did not return. So, was it true? Was the Mothman real? And why was it terrorizing residents in Point Pleasant, Virginia? Now, not everyone believed in the Mothman. Some considered that he was confused with a sandhill crane, which stands as tall as an average man and has bright red flesh around its eyes. Or maybe it was just a deformed crane. Deformed, but how? Well, the McClintock Wildlife Management Area, a bird sanctuary, was surrounded by what was known as the TNT area in Point Pleasant. This was named for the factories that were used to produce explosives for World War II. The factories were abandoned after the war, and the area grew over, despite the fact that TNT was reportedly still being stored on site and contaminating the local environment. Now, another bird that might have been confused for the Mothman was the owl. It shared characteristics to the descriptions of eyewitnesses, and a large snowy owl was shot and killed during that time, and the wingspan was close to 5 feet wide. Now, cranes, owls, TNT aside, there was another explanation. At the time of the sighting in 1966, aliens and UFOs were popular and could have contributed to the myth and the belief in the mysterious Mothman. In the article that covered the couple's sighting, one of the men is quoted as saying, "It wasn't a UFO." So, to make that distinction, it had to be in the zeitgeist and acted a bit as fuel. Or was it all just a prankster? In the book The Mystery Chronicles, Chapter 12, Mothman Solved, the author, Joe Nickell, visited Point Pleasant and did some investigating. Supposedly, a local man dressed in a Halloween costume and he hid at the abandoned munitions complex, the TNT area I referenced earlier. He scared young couples by jumping out of their cars at night. But the idea that the Mothman is the result of a prankster seems unlikely. For one, numerous people have claimed responsibility for the prank, seeming to jump on the bandwagon for clout. And two, that doesn't account for the descriptions of the eyewitnesses said to have seen the Mothman. I mean, I don't think a prankster in a Halloween costume could fly 100 miles an hour. Run clumsily, sure, but fly over cars? I don't think so. But as stated in the book, there were Mothman hoaxes over the years, like construction workers using helium from welding tanks to make balloons from sheet plastic and tied red flashlights to them one night. Cute, terrorizing your neighbors, that's always a good call. Now, a year after the first sighting of the Mothman, a tragedy struck Point Pleasant. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge, constructed to connect Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with cars. Without warning, a single eye bar near the top of the bridge on the Ohio side cracked, the chain snapped, and the bridge crumbled. Cars and pedestrians fell into the Ohio River below. 46 people died that day. It was considered the deadliest bridge disaster in modern history. Now, part of the reason it collapsed was the weight of the cars. Obviously, when it was built, cars were lighter than the ones on the bridge in 1967. So, how does this connect to the Mothman? Well, people claim to have seen Mr. Moth standing on the bridge the day before it collapsed. Now, this, after the fact, was determined to be a bad omen, which projected the idea that the Mothman appeared before catastrophe was about to strike. Because of this, the Mothman sightings were attributed to other catastrophes in other countries, like Chernobyl, where workers saw the Mothman before the disaster happened. He was even called the Black Bird of Chernobyl. Now, the idea that the Mothman was a prophet of doom was adopted by author John Keel and used in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. If you read the book or recognize the title, then you may remember that the book was adapted into a film in 2002 starring Richard Gere. Now, Gere played a journalist whose wife saw a moth-like vision before she was killed in a car accident. And Gere, 2 years later, on his way to an interview, blanked out and appeared hundreds of miles away from his intended destination and winds up in Point Pleasant. Here, there are tons of Mothman sightings, and he becomes consumed with identifying the source and figuring out what his wife saw before she died. Even though the Mothman accounts have severely dwindled over the years, to this day, the town has a festival dedicated to the Mothman every September. You can go visit if you're so inclined. They even have a Mothman museum and a 12-foot tall chrome polished statue. It's clear that some residents still very much believe in the creature's existence and in the money tourism brings. Now, if you don't feel like making the trip to Point Pleasant, there's a newish Unsolved Mysteries episode called The Mothman Revisited. It's volume 4, episode 5, and it's playing on Netflix now. The episode chronicles a resurgence of the Mothman in Chicago. Picking up in frequency in 2017, there are now about 161 sightings around the Chicago Lake, Michigan area. And they're considered to be credible sightings. And apparently, what makes a sighting credible is, of course, the credibility of the witness, but they use weather. I don't know if you've heard this before, but so if someone is describing seeing the Mothman in a sky that's clear and they cross-referenced that date with the weather, and it was actually cloudy or rainy, that would lack credibility. And consistency of the account is also considered. So apparently, these Mothman sightings are very credible, using all that as a metric. The Mothman in these sightings is described as black, emaciated, shiny, wet, tall with wings and red eyes. So a little bit different, but same idea. And the sightings happened at night and during the day. So we've got both. So he's out there, folks, and he's in Chicago. So beware if you're traveling in that area. You might just see the Mothman. That's what I got.
We do have some friends who live in Chicago, so I wonder if,
Really?
well, we have some cult members who live in Chicago, so I wonder if they'll.
So, cult members who live in Chicago, apparently there are some. I would love to know if you've had any Mothman sightings or if you've heard about these things happening in your neighborhood. Let us know in the comments.
So, Amy, I covered one of the most well-known BC cryptids, which is interesting that you mentioned the Mothman potentially being a tourist trap because that could be said for our dear Ogopogo.
And can I say, not known to me, which just confirms how much of an Ontarian I am, I guess, because I've never heard of this before.
The Ogopogo is an icon. If you grew up in the Okanagan or going to the Okanagan, many people in southern BC will summer in the Okanagan. I have family who live up there. My mother lived up there for a little while. Uh, we are all familiar with the Ogopogo. Now, the first sightings of Ogopogo, or now I'm going to attempt this, the Silk people who that originated this, the mythology of the Ogopogo. They say it much better than I do, and it's very much at the back of your throat. And even my German speaking cannot get me there, so I'm going to try. It's Nahaha Iku. Dates back to the mid 1800s when Métis settler John McDougall was crossing the lake, Lake Okanagan, with his horses. He was crossing in his canoe with his horses tethered to him, as he has done many times before, when they were suddenly pulled underwater. He had to cut the ropes to save himself from sinking. Now, the first sighting by a European settler was in 1972 by Susan Allison, who claimed to have seen a dinosaur in the lake. Now, Nahaha'iku means spirit of the lake and was not considered to be malevolent at all. The Syilx or Okanagan peoples would make offerings when they crossed the lake, believing the creature to live in a subterranean cave at Squally Point. And they were just asking the creature for safe passing, basically. It was also, this serpent was pictured in petroglyphs as an aquatic serpent and is believed to serve as a reminder for care of the water, land, and environment, which is kind of at the core of a lot of indigenous mythology and tales of the land, of being stewards of the land. Now, there are many theories as to what Ogopogo might be. One is that it's just a gigantic sturgeon. And while white sturgeon are indigenous to other areas of BC, dams were built in the 1920s that cut Lake Okanagan off from their habitats. So, how'd they get in there? And while sturgeon can live a very long time, this one would have to be over 100 years old at this point. And while they can grow up to 20 feet long, which is terrifying, they are bottom feeders who don't typically come up to the surface. And the descriptions of Ogopogo are similar to a sturgeon, but the creature is significantly larger and has the capacity to tip boats and pull horses underwater, which I don't think a sturgeon can do. Another theory is that it's a prehistoric creature. Crocodiles were alive during the late Cretaceous period, so were snakes and sharks. The duck-billed platypus, Amy, dates to the Jurassic period. Can you imagine the music queuing up and that voice booming over the speakers saying,
"Welcome to Jurassic Park."
And there's this little duck-billed platypus just staring at you? It's so cute.
I love it.
Right? Of course, Ogopogo could also just be a rogue wave. These have been photographed when the lake is calm and there aren't any boats in the water to disrupt the lake. which is interesting, but no one really knows why it happens. It could be seasonal temperature changes, it could be underwater currents or rising gases, which happens to the best of us. But some of the footage captured of Ogopogo makes you question if you can pass off the serpent as a wave. The first piece of evidence of Ogopogo was captured in 1968 by Art Folden. He and his wife were driving by the lake when they noticed something strange. He managed to capture a large creature diving into the water and resurfacing multiple times. The creature is estimated to be 40 feet long. Then in 1980, Larry Thal was vacationing on the lake when he managed to capture the same image of the same size creature that's movement was creating massive waves in an isolated lake. Ogopogo was such a hot topic around this time in the 80s that Lloyd's of London offered a $1 million reward for anyone who could capture the serpent alive. Greenpeace got involved and said that Ogopogo was an endangered species and must only be captured on film. Now, in the 1800s, a vertebrae was found in the lake that was believed to be from a whale, but it went missing. So no one was able to determine how it got there or what it belonged to. I don't know how you lose a gigantic vertebrae, but government, who knows? Regardless, it is clear that the Nahahaiku and the Ogopogo are two very different creatures. One is a sacred spirit that protects the lake and reminds us to be stewards of the land, and the other is a colorful tourist trap that helps bring travelers from afar to the region. Whatever this mystical creature is, it has been protected under the BC Wildlife Act since 1989, so it's probably best to observe from afar. Now, Amy, I do have to tell you that my mother claims to have seen Ogopogo.
What? This is a new development.
She claims to have seen it. So, and that she is not a big paranormal type person. So,
What year?
I would guess in like the 70s or maybe the early 80s would be my guess.
That's pretty cool.
But the Ogopogo is everywhere. But I wish I knew how to say Nahahaiku better because it sounds cooler and I like the idea that it's this like sacred, they say it's a sacred spirit that can take on a manifestation of a physical form
I
and show
like
itself,
that.
which I
Yeah.
like. And I like the idea that it's a steward of the lake and just reminding you to treat your environment with kindness. And but of course, as a lot of things like with the Mothman, people saw indigenous peoples offering things to the spirit of the lake and we're like, oh, they're giving it meat, it must be a bloodthirsty monster, which although the imagery of Ogopogo when you go up there is it's a cartoon, basically it's a cartoon character. So.
Right. Yeah.
Now I did do some investigation. Well, as we all know, I am a huge fan of ghost stories in Vancouver. The last 2 Octobers I have done videos about them that people can find, but I decided to dig up two stories for you. And one of them is a place that we have both spent a decent amount of time in. So I'm going to save that one for last. But are you
Oh
ready for my
God.
two Vancouver ghost stories, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have ever been to Gastown, our great historic Gastown built in 1970, essentially, then you have probably gone to the old spaghetti factory. The old spaghetti factory is part of a chain of restaurants across Canada known for their delightful pairings of pasta and spumoni ice cream. The Poulos brothers, Andy, Lee, and Peter, opened their first location in Vancouver's iconic Gastown in March of 1970. While it's quite the draw for tourists with its cozy antique decor, it's also famous for its resident ghosts. Resident ghosts, you ask? Yes, there are 4 well-known ghosts that haunt the restaurant. There's a small mischievous spirit who is said to have a ruddy face and bright red hair. No, it is not me. He is known as the Little Red Man or Looky Loo and has a penchant for calling out to the staff by their names. While he also enjoys taking a casual stroll through the kitchen, he also enjoys surprising guests in the ladies' washroom. 2 such guests claim to have seen a dwarfish man exit a stall wearing a red shirt and red long johns. One of them attempted to take a photo of the man, but when her film was developed, he was nothing but a blur. Then there's a little girl who appears at one of the tables in the front window. She likes to sit very still while holding a balloon. Remind you of anyone, Amy?
Yep.
Your crush? One general manager had a conversation with her that lasted for several minutes. She told him that she was looking for her mother. He left to go discuss her with another manager, but when he came back, she was gone. No one knows who she is. She's not the only kid lurking about, though. There's also a little boy who likes to scare the jeepers out of staff. A psychic once identified him as Edward. He has blonde hair that is parted down the middle and wears blue overalls. She also said that there's a vortex at the back of the building that enables these spirits to come through, but that there are some of the antiques in the restaurant that are also connected to the spirits. Edward likes to play his own pranks on the staff, like bending cutlery. One staff member did a walkthrough to check all of the place settings and was stunned to find cutlery bent upwards. But when they brought a manager to see what had happened, everything had been put back to normal. He also likes to place chairs on the back tables during the night. Another staff member had been closing up for the night when a little boy ran past her. The restaurant was closed and she thought this was quite strange, so she followed him. I personally would have noped right out of there in case you were wondering. But when she finally caught up to him and he turned around to look at her, he had no eyeballs, just black holes where they should have been.
No.
This obviously scared the crap out of her, and she ran to the manager to report her sighting, no pun intended, and quit on the spot. Now, the final and most notorious ghost is the trolley car ghost. When the restaurant was being built, they had a BC Electric Company tram installed. Trolley number 53, built in New Westminster in 1904. It had served the city faithfully until it was decommissioned in 1957. The ghost of the uniformed conductor always sits at the same table well after closing. Place settings around him are moved and cold spots are felt. Most believe that he came with the train car, but the source of his demise is disputed. There was one rumor that he perished in a collision on an underground rail line below the restaurant, but the trolley cars ran above ground, so this is unlikely. What we do know is that he is seen on the regular. One particularly interesting story was that of two women who were dining at the restaurant when they approached a manager to discuss some things they had seen. The first was Edward, of course, but who they really wanted to talk about was the man in the trolley car. They said that he was upset because they didn't put his picture up in the restaurant. The manager was confused, and then they said that it would be easier to explain if they could go to where the picture was kept, in the manager's office. The minute they walked into the office, they immediately looked up and pointed to a picture of the conductor that the manager didn't even know was there. "That's him there," the lady exclaimed. She told the manager that he said he wanted it hung in the restaurant. And I do believe it is in the trolley car now. But I do have to note that there was a massive fire on Water Street in the late 1800s that wiped out the area. And so the ghosts of Gastown are plentiful because of this.
I was gonna ask. I have never been to the spaghetti factory,
You
and
haven't?
now I never will.
No, we have to go.
I don't want to see those entities.
They have spumoni ice cream. It's delicious. Well, if you don't want to go there, then this one's going to be
Oh God, what?
especially good for you. My second story is of the Stanley Theater at 2750 Granville Street.
Oh, dear God.
Mhm. The Stanley opened on December 15th, 1930, built by Frederick Guest, who owned a chain of theaters in Ontario. He had originally imagined it as a vaudeville venue. The first film that they showed was One Romantic Night, starring Lillian Gish. Famous players bought the Stanley in 1941, and in 1954, they started showing films in stereophonic cinema scope. Revenue started to decline for the Stanley, though, in the late 80s, and Famous Players closed the doors on September 25th, 1991, after the final showing of Fantasia. At the time of closing, it was the oldest theater in Vancouver. Famous Players put the iconic building up for sale, but under one condition: it could not be used as a theater. A movie theater, that is. No competition. The city had originally approved plans to convert the interior into a retail space, but the Stanley stood empty for several years regardless. Residents started a Save Our Stanley campaign to preserve the original building along with its intended use as an entertainment space. In response, the Stanley Theater Society was formed to save the space, and in 1997, they were able to purchase the theater from Famous Players for a cool $3.173 million. Now, as the saying goes in Vancouver, all theaters are haunted. It's believed that the ghosts feed off the massive amount of energy that actors put out during the show. The Stanley ghosts are a particular set who apparently hate wartime plays and will kick the seats of theater goers during performances. There is also allegedly a female ghost who haunts the upper balcony area. People have said to have seen her jumping off the balcony, and others say they have felt a dark presence in the area. During one ghost hunt, a figure was captured on the balcony on an SLS camera, which is the one with the creepy stick figures that captured people up there. And I know that I've sat up in that balcony area, Amy.
Yeah, you have. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think
You put me there.
I didn't know. I didn't. There was a mix up.
But yes,
I
I know that you
didn't.
spent a decent amount of time in the theater, so I thought you'd like to know a little bit of history about it.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, we're going back in you and I. It's a beautiful building, but I think the beauty comes from what you're talking about. I mean, it's an old
Heritage,
building.
yeah.
It's very like, yeah,
Well,
that,
that's the
yeah,
same goes for the Granville Strip. It was originally a place for vaudeville acts during the gold rush because Vancouver was a town that many would pass through during that era. And the Orpheum, the Vogue, they all have their own
yeah,
long-term residents.
yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? Theaters have really good ghost stories, I'm sure.
Well, I think that's interesting because you know that actors they expel so much energy, so much emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that spirits allegedly thrive on is that energy and that emotion. So it would be a great place for them to exist to constantly have that.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we want to go into some personal ghost stories, don't we?
Because you and I, well, obviously we're doing these because we believe in
Yeah.
things, and I think that we are both
Yeah.
a little bit more sensitive to things than some are.
Yeah.
And we've had some interesting experiences. Even together, we've had interesting experiences.
Yes, we have. I don't know. It's the energy we put out, I guess. But
Very emotional.
I've had two kind of very intense experiences in this capacity. All right. So one of my ghost stories concerns my husband, and I will call him Jay in this retelling. And it's been a few years now. I would say it's probably 9 years old, this story. Like this happened 9 years ago. So I'm going to be reliving this and I'm probably going to be remembering details as I go. So bear with me. So when I lived in my old place, my bedroom had French doors. So the bed faced the French doors, which is significant because this is, if you imagine lying down in your bed and like staring at the French doors, depending on where the light is shining, a silhouette might be, pronounced. Anyway, one night, my husband Jay was, I think, out with friends. Or it was a work event or something. He was out late, and I remember being in bed and I had fallen asleep. I woke up to the sound of the door opening and I started to stir and I kind of turned over and I looked at the French doors, which were now open, and I saw Jay's silhouette. Like he was standing in the French doors and he was kind of looking at me at the bed. And I just went, "Oh, you're home." And I turned to my side and like went back, tried to go back to sleep. And I felt the bed uh have weight put on it. Like I felt somebody sit beside me on the bed, Jay, presumably, right? And that presence and that weight was kind of hovering over me. And I fell asleep thinking, oh, great, he's home. I woke up a few hours later to the door unlocking and the light being turned on. And I looked over and Jay was not beside me. And Jay comes into the bedroom and I said, "Are you just getting home now?" And he said, "Yes." And I had this moment of, don't freak out. It clearly you were dreaming or something. But when I tell you, it felt so real. Like when I tell you it was not a dream, it was crazy. So I kind of, when he was back sleeping beside me, I felt safe because he was actually home, but that never left me. This happened again in varying degrees. So I would feel that weight sometimes when Jay was not home, and it would be in this place between sleep and being awake and aware. But the weight would get more oppressive. Like the more it happened, the more I felt like, oh, I don't like this. It was just like it would get, it would just become more consuming, and I felt like I couldn't move, which again, I think describes a little bit of lucid dreaming, but it wasn't. I don't know how to like be sure that it wasn't, but I just know in my soul because I've never been a lucid dreamer and I've never been since and I've never been before and whatever. So I don't even think I brought it up with Jay. I don't think I brought it up with anybody because I just couldn't talk. Like I didn't know how to describe it or explain it and add context to it in a way that made it not seem like I was crazy or people would just dismiss it as a dream. So I just left it alone. Flash to my mother-in-law and my father-in-law coming to visit us and staying in our place. And they took our bedroom and we slept on our in our living room because it's a one bedroom. And one night, this was like near the end of their trip. My mother-in-law wakes me up in the morning and she says, "I'm not telling this to scare you, but I just want to let you know that I dealt with it." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I sensed a dark energy in your bedroom." And my heart is beating really fast, right? Because I didn't tell her anything. She said, "I woke up one night and I saw what looked like Jay standing in the French doors, like in that door frame." The fact that she said it looked like her son when I had been saying thinking it was Jay freaked me out. Like I have goosebumps talking about this. She said, because this woman is very spiritual. And she said, "I told it to go to be gone, and I use like the power of Christ, and we're gonna do an olive oil like cross on all of your entry points today." And but he's gone. I'm telling you, I got rid of him. I told him he's not welcome. We went and she did these like little crosses in olive oil on the French doors and like the door to the condo and like the balcony doors and everything. Ever since she did that, I never experienced it again. And I don't, I've never had anything like that in my life. And my husband still thinks I'm being, like he's still, but I think it comes from a place of deep fear because he can't handle anything scary, anything religious, anything about like demons or entities. He can't handle it. But there is something, I looked this up after the fact, and it was that when entities take on the form of someone you love and trust to entice you and to lure you, that's what it was. Definitely. And my mother-in-law, who's very spiritual, took care of it. So that was my ghost story. And again, I've never seen Ghost Jay from that day forward. And I lived there for many years after that. So yeah, that's my ghost story. I mean, I have more, but that's the one that is most I don't know, still shakes me to my core.
That would shake me to my core as well. And now it's making me second guess the story that I was going to tell about a
Why?
benevolent. Well, so I had told you a story about my grandmother passing away and how I the
Yes.
Polaroid and the VCR, and I had told another story, but we cut it because I was going to save it for now.
Yes.
And that is that my grandmother had had cancer. She had esophageal cancer, and she had gone into remission, and then she had gotten sick again. And I was 3 when she passed away. So when this happened, I was probably like 2-ish, going on 3. And my mom had put me down for a nap, and the phone rang. And she had been walking down the hallway because she heard me crying as she heard the phone ring. So she kind of stopped and grabbed the phone. And it was my aunt. It was one of her sisters. And she was like, hold on a second, like Meg's crying. I need to go check on her. And my aunt was like, no, wait, I have to tell you something. And mom was like, just wait, like Meg's crying. And went into my room, and I was on my bed with my knees clutched to my chest, rocking back and forth, crying for my nan, just crying out for her, which was weird to my mom. My mom went like, what, like, I don't know what's, and my aunt went at that moment, mom's gone. And they had thought that she was gone. There had been something with her pain medication or something. The paramedics came, they were trying to resuscitate her. They thought she was gone. And it turned out the exact moment that she was gone, I started crying out for her. And I didn't know that this had happened, but I had always felt connected to my nan because she passed away when I was really young. And I had felt connected to her. And my mom was like, well, you too, you were very connected, because she couldn't speak for the majority of my life because she had had her larynx removed. And she
Oh.
would be able to somehow was communicating with me, and I couldn't read yet, but I would know exactly what she wanted. I would toddle out and ask for my papa George, and had no idea how she was getting me this information because I couldn't read. Like, we were just very connected, and they ended up resuscitating her, and she lived for a little while longer. But this story had come up because I had said to my mom, my mom believed, she said, like, well, I believe that, spirits cross over, or
Yeah.
that they come and visit us, that they check in on us, because my mom comes to me in my dreams. And I was like, what do you mean she comes to you in your dreams? And she was like, I have dreams where she walks into the room. And I was like, and she sits on the edge of your bed. And she was like, yeah, how did you know that? And I'm like, are you sure it's a dream? And my mom was like, what do you mean? I'm like, because sometimes, especially when I'm having a hard time, or I've talked to her in a moment of sadness at night, I will feel something in my room and sit down on my bed, and it's a very comforting presence. And I will feel the weight on the edge of the bed, and I know that it's my nan. And she just kind of looked at me like she didn't want me to be like, well, are you sure it's a dream? But we have been having the same experience for years.
That is so crazy.
And I had had 2 incidents. I had had one where I was driving home from my husband, who was then my boyfriend. I was driving home from his house. I had to go around a different way than I usually took because there was a police incident on my street. And I had to go around to this 4-way stop, and it was late at night. There was nobody else on the road. And as I was about to go into the intersection, I heard somebody call my name into my ear, and I slammed on the brakes as somebody went ripping through the 4-way, would have killed me. They came out of nowhere. They were blowing through the 4-way stop, and I would have been gone.
Oh my
And then the
God.
second time that happened, I was at a 4-way stop coming off the highway. My mom was behind me. She had taken me to go, my car was getting serviced. So she met me there, and then we went to the mall or whatever. And then we were driving back. So she was behind me. There was nobody at the 4-way stop, but there was an overpass that leads down to where we were. And as I was entering the intersection, I heard that voice. It was a female voice yelling my name in my ear. I slammed on my brakes as a pickup truck came barreling through the intersection. I felt my car shake. He like just missed my front bumper. Again, I would have not been here if he
Oh
had hit
my
me. A cop had just been going through, like an undercover cop had just gone through the intersection, whipped on his
God.
lights, whipped around, went after him. My mother was like, she was shaking when we got home because she thought that I was gone. She thought that was it.
Oh,
And
that's
I like 1,000%
terrifying.
believe that that's my grandmother, like watching out for me.
See, You have a beautiful protective ghost, and I have a demon husband. What does
Well,
that say about
but
us?
I also grew up like the house that my parents bought, they got like a screaming deal on it because the elderly couple who had lived in it, it was like only a couple years old. The guy had died in the driveway under the car. He had had a heart attack. And the
Ugh.
lady was so distraught, she gave my parents like the screaming deal on this house. And I always felt a weird energy in the house. Like my parents' house, you walk in the front door and there's like a landing, and you either go upstairs or you go downstairs to a three-quarter
Yeah.
basement. And all the living space is upstairs. And then we have like our laundry room and stuff downstairs. And then we had like a playroom and a sewing room. And then like our TV room, which was also our home office, and I would go down and watch TV. And I had this weird sensation whenever I would go up that first set of stairs that I had to run up it because it felt like something was pulling me back.
No, I don't like that. No.
And then like our bathrooms were stacked on top of each other. And if you got up late at night to go to the bathroom while everyone else was sleeping, you would hear water running in the
That is
bathroom
weird.
below. And then one time I was sewing downstairs and the light above me, it was daylight, but the light above me like would flicker and then turn off. And then I'd look up at it and it would go back on. And then I'd go back to what I was doing and it would turn off. And like this happened a few times until I looked back in it and I went, can you just give me a minute to finish what I'm doing? And then I will go upstairs. And it turned back on and stayed on. And my husband Nate, he was like that's wiring. It's an older house, and I was like, does wiring listen to you when you make
Yeah.
requests of it?
No, I know, I know, I know. No, no. Do you feel that still when you go home to visit your mom?
I don't go downstairs. Nobody else that I know has said that they felt anything. Like my parents offered to put my bedroom down there because there was a full bathroom. It had a separate entrance. I could have gotten into a lot of trouble as a teenager, but
Yeah.
I couldn't be down there.
Yeah.
Didn't feel malicious. It just felt weird.
Yeah, I've
Like maybe
always
it
like
didn't want
yeah.
me to go. Like maybe it like was like lonely or something, because it was an older man who passed away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I've always
Yeah.
wanted to live in England, but like every house that my family lives in has been haunted. And my uncle,
Oh,
my
of
dad's
course.
my dad never believed in any of that. My dad was very much like, no, didn't watch, also did not like watching like fictional things. The only fictional things that he enjoyed watching was Hellboy. I don't know why, but the man loved like World War II stuff. Like he liked nonfiction and things that were like
Yeah.
based on real things.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't, but his younger brother, like, but it's because they went to England. My two uncles went to England when they were younger, and they grew up in this like the first home they lived in was this creepy Victorian townhouse, and he said that the knobs would jiggle.
Oh
And
yeah,
because my
no.
grandfather would leave them at home alone at like 10, of course. We know that he was a lovely man. And the little girl whose mom watched over like all of the units in the townhouse, she was like, oh, that's like the like so and so. Like they had a name for the ghosts that would come and shake the handles. And she was like, it's fine. He's harmless. And so he would tell me stuff like they had this amazing Tudor home that I had stayed in when I was little. And he said that he would put a pen down and it would go somewhere else and there would be nobody in the house. And I had this parrot that they had bought me from Harrods where you pulled the string and it had an English accent. It would be like, Polly want cracker. And but like I had let go of the string and it went and my mom was like, Megan, let go of the string. And I was like, I'm not holding it, mom. And she was like, Megan, you're holding the string. And I was like, I'm not holding the string. To this day, she still claims that I was holding the string, but I was not.
Did you
That
set it
parrot
on
was
fire?
haunted. I
Did you
don't
set
even, I
it?
think I might have left it behind,
Yeah, good call.
but
Good
it
call.
terrified me in that
Is that
house.
why? Because you said you're scared of like inanimate objects being sort of,
Well, that was Chucky. Chucky did
yeah,
that to me, but then that didn't help.
yeah,
That's why Elf on the Shelf, I would never, as a parent, I'd be like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, we are not doing that. Toys should not move while you're sleeping.
I just don't have the energy to think up all these scenarios for that elf
I don't
story.
have that time either or energy. I don't even have the energy to have a child. But my aunt and uncle now live in a house that was built in 1886. It's as old as Vancouver. Nothing's happened, but my cousin bought a house, like a row house in old council housing. It had been converted from council housing from the 60s. and he had bought it. He had like an end, and it was by a railroad. And I always feel like things that are by like railroads and stuff, there's always like a weird energy.
Yeah.
And we had gone over to hang out with them, and the way that they had their, like, you walked in and they had like those 60s stairs, like the carpeted slatted stairs with the big chunky handrail, and then they
Yeah.
had a couch that was like here, and then they had another couch that was facing towards the staircase, and Nate and I were on that couch, and then my cousin and his now ex-wife were on the other couch, and I'm sitting there and I keep seeing a shadow, and I'm assuming that it's their little Shih Tzu, their like elderly decrepit Shih Tzu that I'm seeing on these stairs moving. But like my cousins, they're not my nephews, my cousins have gone to bed, and I'm assuming it's a Shih Tzu. And I see my cousin, he keeps looking at me as I'm looking at the stairs, and he finally goes, "Are you seeing something on the stairs?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's your dog." And he went, "No, she's on the loft bed," because my little cousin had a loft bed and she couldn't get down. She was a tiny dog. "She's on the loft bed with him in his room." And I went, "Oh, okay."
And
He's
because
like,
he's seen it too.
and he was like, "You're seeing a shadow, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like bouncing on the stairs." And he was like, and his ex-wife looked at him and was like, and he was like, he's like, "I've never told you this," to her. He's like, "I've never said anything to any of you, but I see shadows in this house." And I used to think that they were from like cars, but it was like a dead end road. Like there were no cars going back and forth or
No,
anything.
no, no,
He's
no,
like,
no.
"I used to think that they were from cars." He's like, "But I didn't want to scare you or the kids. And I was just waiting to see if the kids said something to me, but nobody's ever said anything to me." So I was like one of the first people that had seen it.
Well, maybe you have it in your family too.
We're not biologically related. He's my
Oh,
aunt's cousin from her first marriage.
weird.
And but he could see it. And so he had I went home and he messaged me and he was like, "Megan, I was ironing clothes and I saw it. Like, what do I do?" And I was like, "Listen, you have to talk to it. You have to say to it. Like, if it doesn't," I'm like, does it make you feel bad?" He was like, "No." I'm like, "Then just say to it, I don't mind if you stay here, but I don't want to see you and you cannot scare my family."
Yeah.
And then I got a message from like a couple days later. He's like, "I said that. I have not seen it since."
Megan, you should have been in the show The Ghost Whisperer.
I should have, right?
Yeah. Why didn't you take care of my ghost?
I don't know. Your ghost sounds scary. Thankfully, like your in-laws are from like a culture that believes in those things and are receptive to those things and like know how to
Yeah.
handle them, which is obviously why your husband is scared crapless of them, because that is his culture,
Yes.
is very much
Yeah, exactly.
that
Good
with your
God.
Catholic family. I'm just it's a great mix.
I know. Not great. But I want to hear everybody else's scary stories. You should write them down in the comments or let
Mm-hmm.
us know, and we could read some of them.
We do want to know people's scary stories. Even though it's terrifying, it's fun to hear other things because you've told me some of your other ones that are absolutely horrifying. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we did have a funny one together. I feel
Oh,
like we
yeah.
should wrap this up with a funny one that we were babysitting for a friend. She's at that point she had two daughters, very adorable daughters.
Yes.
One of them weirdly looks like me. I I'm not
Yeah.
her mother. But we were feeding them dinner. We were feeding the older one dinner. The younger one was already asleep. And we were sitting at the table and she goes, "What are those feet?" And I remember the look on Amy's face, like the blood drained out of Amy's face. And she went, "What feet, sweetie?" And the girl went, "The upside down feet in the kitchen." Now they were in a real like an old house. They're in an old
Yeah.
house.
You need that context because the reason the blood drained from my face was that I had a feeling in there. Like it was,
Yeah.
I think it was also where it was.
It's
Like,
by a big park. It's in an older
yeah,
part of Vancouver.
and it was very late.
The cemetery is nearby.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it was a whole vibe, and it was rain. I think it was,
It was a gloomy, like, yeah,
yes.
like wintry night. And she was like, and Amy just was like, what upside down feet? And she went, the feet in the kitchen. And it was very dark, and they had like kind of a little room off it, like a sunroom off of it that was very dark, and it was very like hard to see. And I kind of looked at you and I looked at her, and I felt okay because we had each other. I was like, we can fight any ghosts together. I believe in us.
Yeah.
And she was like the feet, and then Amy was like, you see feet, sweetie? And she was like, yes, the upside down feet. And I'm like, what's going on? So I get up. I'm like, okay, because they're gonna keep going back and forth like this. So I get up and look, and it was this weird chicken decoration that was upside down. Its feet were sticking up. And I was like, Amy, it's the chicken. It's the upside down chicken. But then the girls' rooms were also in this converted attic, and you had to go up these tiny stairs to get up to the converted attic. And there was like a vibe up there too. And we had to go read her books.
Yes, but
And then
you're
they also
forgetting her
had the,
voice.
oh my, yeah, she had
Her voice over
the baby
baby
monitor, which
monitor. We
already gives kids demon eyes in those
Yes,
night monitors.
exactly. But we heard her talking to herself.
Yeah.
And we obviously realized after that she had snuck in the iPad and was stealing iPad time while she was supposed to be sleeping. But when we were just sitting there, we were just hearing this little giggle and this voice coming out of the baby monitor. And I was like, okay, tonight is spooky night. Like I just
And I sent Amy up. I was like, you're better with kids.
yeah, thanks.
I sent her in the room, and I stood by the door, and all I heard was, we can't use the iPad, sweetie. We have to go to sleep.
She was so cute.
Oh my god,
She was so
absolute cutest.
articulate too.
Yeah.
She was so smart. And I mean, yeah, like I just it's hard to um what is it? We had to compromise. So we
Yeah.
spent some more time up there, which was fine.
But
I
little kids
figured,
also are really receptive to
hmm
things that we aren't.
yeah.
So when they do stuff like that, like my baby niece freaks my mother-in-law out because she just stares into this one corner,
Yes. Oh God.
and we're convinced that it's my mother-in-law's father haunting her.
Oh my God. That's crazy. Well, and we talked about this kids and dogs and animals.
Yep.
it's um it's equally terrifying sometimes when you're home alone with your animals and feeling like you feel safer, but then they do these weird things where they'll stare at something that doesn't exist or start barking when there's no noise, and you're like, oh, okay, well, what now? What demon has entered my space?
You gotta get that olive oil out.
Yeah. Yeah, that was wild. I kept that up for a really long time.
I don't
I did
blame you.
not wipe that down until I was sure. Yeah.
Bless her for that.
Seriously. And then she saged our place and almost burnt it down, but that's okay. Crisis was averted.
That's
We
one
needed
way
to
to
do a
get rid of
whole,
the
yeah, we got
spirit.
rid of, there was like a multi-step process to just ensuring that this J demon was gone for good. I followed her lead. Well, ghosty episode under the belt.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this super spooky episode with me and Auntie Amy. We will be back next week with more terrifying tales. Until then, stay safe,
Check your candy.
and may the cult
Be with you.